Curiosity Collage. Greetings, my family. What's happening? Welcome to Curiosity Collage, Ep.3. This is your host, Dr. Garfield, right? Like I said, welcome to Curiosity Collage. Look, we're going to get into it today. Episode 3 is entitled, Should We Be Keeping It Real? And listen, it's a quick little background. When I was a little shorty, playing, football with a little milk carton in front of people's yards, boom, 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 get tackled. I used to look up sometimes and it'll be a stake stuck in the ground that has such and such realty or such and such real estate, you know what I mean? And I just got curious, I'm a curious minded dude, hence Curiosity Collage. And I was always wondering, why do they call it real estate? Or realty, what? I see it right here, I'm on it. Why they gotta say real estate? Is there something called fake estate? So I used to ask adults, why they call that real estate? Why they feel like they gotta say real? And nobody ever could give me adequate answers. So that's what Curiosity Collage is all about, finding those answers from when I was a child. I didn't get that adequate answer. So here we go, I'm gonna unload on you what I've learned. And it's pretty deep about what real estate means. Real itself, it all hinges on the word real, because real stuff is like a deep meaning. It's so small of a four-letter word. And we've been conditioned to solely believe in a certain definition of what real means. The concept of real, as we know it, got instantiated between 1150 and 1500. That's when real kind of came into the lexicon, started to be used, by the way. Now, real, the way we understand it, definitely means real is something that's actually existing, right? That's a truth, but it's a reason for it actually even meaning this. It also is a thing, a thing that actually exists. Like this whole concept of it being a thing is also, something that we're going to explore. Something that's not imagined, something that also has independent. And these are key definitions: existence. Something that actually exists, something that's a thing, something that independently exists. These are all definitions of real that we've been conditioned to know. But this concept of real is actually a double meaning at all times. There's another aspect to it. And it kind of comes down to how we pronounce the word, right? Because all these words in the English language pretty much have a Latin base. But let's look at real, because it's actually of multiple origins. So it comes, it borrows heavily from French, Spanish origins, and you get the Latin. Even though these Romance languages come from Latin in the first place, but you got late Latin and just like the original Latin, stuff like that, for this concept of real. And we're gonna actually explore this whole situation. So on the one hand, you got real or reality. I'm gonna throw reality here too. It's coming from that base. But on the one hand, it comes back to like I said, the Latin, res. That word res, which is really really, look how we use it, really. Rex, which is king. Oedipus Rex and stuff like that. Rex means king. Then you got the late Latin, boom, boom, where you got real that comes down to, realis, which means thing, like I said before. And I'm gonna keep this up here because this is gonna play a big prominent role. How can king and thing have any kind of similarity? Well, you gotta think about it. Well, before I get to that, the other hand, this is one hand. On the other hand, and this is gonna be an interesting dynamic. Let's hold off and let's look at this. But on the other hand, you got French language, borrowed from Spanish, French masculine. Because remember, my question was about real estate. I needed to understand why they called it real. We're gonna keep that up there too. We're gonna refer back to this a lot. And so the French masculine gave me, boom, that little accent mark on top of it, right? When you do it like that, it automatically comes to this. Royal. Real estate is actually royal estate. And so, royal is sitting there, it becomes a nickname. When you say royal, like pronounced in real, it's like somebody who behaves in a regal manner. Like you got the Viscount, the Duchess, the Baron, those type of Duke, that kind of thing. Or it could become an occupational name for somebody in service of the king based on those same titles, or a topographic type of name, somebody that lived on the land that actually belongs to the king. But we're gonna know that all land ultimately belongs to the king. That's why it's royal estate. That's what we're gonna end up talking about and getting to. It got introduced in the 19th century in terms of slang, like people start using the concept of the real McCoy, which was a black inventor who I think he invented something dealing with some kind of apparatus or mechanism to separate something. I don't know if it dealt with machinery, but if you got his actual authentic one, you got the real McCoy. And then people start transferring that over to other parts. Like if you were a good fighter, somebody, is he for real? Like, yeah, he's the real McCoy. They start expanding the concept into all other things. But let's look at reality again. Let's look at it. Now we got this Latin Rex for king, right? This real, this res, which is, a Latin res. And then we also got realis, which is a thing. And you're looking at it like, how in the world, could these two be related? Well, now you're starting to peer into the aristocracy mindset. Rex was the original, because this is late Latin right here. Realis. Originally though, rex, king. The word thing distilled from that, because why? King, just like the Pope or somebody like that who saw themselves as instantiated as God pretty much on earth, they were the only thing. They were the only thing. Everything we ascribe to the word real, which is a thing, something that's real, something that is material, substantial. In their mind, they were the only thing that was that. Anything outside of kingness, royalness, was not even a thing. So the only thing was a king. He was the only thing around his land. Everything else was subject to him. So they weren't even on his level. They weren't even instantiated as an actual thing itself. So the word thing kind of comes from the concept of king being instantiated as a god human on this planet, and everything else revolving around him. So you started getting thing and king being one and the same. Anything outside of kingness was not real. And then later, the mid 16th century, what you started getting was from the realitas, medieval Latin. You start dealing with this realitas, you started getting, the root word of the word realty and reality. And guess what? The very concept of reality and realty through realitas, coming from the king himself, royalty, was tied to property, land. So let's get the lineup. Thing, land, king. These attributes all fall under real. They are all interchangeable. Like the only thing is the king. Everything outside of that is not existent. Land and kingship goes hand in hand because its value is tied to the land. And the fact that royal, is the ultimate expression of it is the king. And so property started being associated with realitas, right? And that's where we get realty from. You see those realty signs. True existence that we ascribe to royalty, reality, didn't even come into, it wasn't a thing until like 1647. The concept of real being like true existence, the way we use it today, something that truly exists. It didn't even happen until later on. So you got real as a slick programming word that kind of like sinks into our mainframe, And now it instantiates itself, and we don't even attach it to royalty anymore. It's something that has a double meaning. Yes, it means a thing in the way we use it now, but it also means royal, bourgeois, monarchical at the same time. A real person ain't somebody that's just not a ghost. A real person is actually a royal person when they refer to real. You refer to yourself as a real person, but you're not a real person because you're not royal. Real person, a real person is the king in them, right? The bourgeois. And I'm going to talk to how the bourgeois fits in a little while. But there's a double meaning, and it just reflects how the aristocracy saw themselves and their identity as being the only truth. The only truth is those who are real, who are royal. They're real people. You something outside of that. You know what I'm saying? So any idea that extends from them, any land, any systems, those are all royal. Those are real. Everything else is not, which substantiated in their mind, in their imaginary, how they could just take over American land away from the Indians. Because whatever the Indians or the Native Americans were doing wasn't real. It wasn't royal. So it didn't count. So let's put our thing on top because that's actual and real. So it justified slavery. It justified a lot of things that worldview. So, but let's look at the term real estate once again, because that's what I kind of came to this thing for. UK property law, which American law comes out of that by extension, descends from what we know as the feudal ages, right? The feudal ages informed this real estate thing. How is that the case? Okay, let's look at it. The feudal ages, medieval times. And so all real property, and I'm gonna put this in quotes, all real property meant all land. All land was real property. Anything that was based on land was real property. All land was real property. And so if anything that was on the land too, like any house built, warehouse, whatever shed, anything was real property. But real, you're talking about royal property. The concept of property is automatically royal. So all land is automatically royal. Think about that, all land. Land itself as a concept is royal, period. And so you get from real property, which was a precursor to real estate, royal estate, right? Because we looking at real as being actual, but real is that because it's royal. It's the only thing that's actual. The only thing that could be a real thing in the case of land was real estate, royal estate. It's the actual estate, and it's owned by the king and everything on it, you better believe. So who could own real estate? Who could own this real property? Because we're in the feudal ages, right? We're talking about the landed nobility. The nobles. Through something called noblesse oblige. It was their duty, the nobles obligated to own land. It was their responsibility. And it was a category of nobility, the aristocracy in all these various countries. And the concept of land ownership was their noble privileges. These dukes and these viscounts, they were land owners. So the nobility class was always the owners of land. Hence the word royal in front of it, disguised as what we see as real, right? That was their privileges from back in the day. And they had to fulfill their social responsibility to own that. So then he gave rise to the manorial system, the manor. And all of these, units of social, the proximity to the manor, just like the house, in the field, the proximity to the manor with all these merchants rising up, and because the manor was the main thing, and all these different workers and boom, the proximity to the main manor gave you your class and your distinction up until you got to the royal people stuff. And so the manorial system kind of gave early rise to what we know as like the lords and the serfs. Yeah, serfdom. It's an evil. It's an ugly evil. It's an E. And the Lord owned the serfs and all the land and everything on it. The serfs worked for the Lord. They tilled the farms. They were like a type of slave. They worked the land, they grew crops, and they even had to pay rent to the Lord. Think about that. After all that, they had to still pay rent. But they were the poorest of the classes on there. And the Lord, even though the manor would change hands from another noble, whoever were the serfs on that land, the Lord would still own them. So now you're starting to get this royal estate concept, how deep it goes. It's actually bigger than just the land. It's any extension of the land. is owned by the Lord. And we got to interrogate that today. So real estate was something that was first documented in the 1600s as a kind of a term, right? It was, and so we know that the real part, because we want to look at this word now, we know the real part is a thing, it's land. It comes from king and it's royal all at the same time. I'm gonna put royal down here, right? But let's look at the state. This is deep. Estate comes from the Latin word S-T-A-R-E. And it don't say stair, even though you can. But if you say stair, look at it in terms of like stair steps maybe. But it actually literally means standing. Like, what's your standing in the community? Standing. It also comes from the Latin status. Literally, the word status comes out of estate, right? Because estate is so tied to your status. We use status now, like what's your relationship status and stuff like that. But status kind of connoted the amount of land that you own. And it literally in Latin means your condition or your state. What state are you in? And I ain't talking about California. I'm talking about the state of being. What state are you in, right? Status, the Latin word status connotes that. And so the very concept of status comes from owning land. If you're a landowner, you have status, which means you have an estate, right? So when you look at it and boil it down, real estate can literally be interpreted as royal status. What's your royal status, right? That's where that comes from. So your status as a real person. And when I say real person, if you switch the accent, say real, your status as a royal person, because that's the only people that are real people. Royal, real. We think we common folks are real. No, we not. They talking about themselves. We just took that. But their status depended on how much land that they actually own. A person is literally tied to the expansiveness of the land that they own. So your royal status was directly linked to the size of real estate that you possess. So the king had the ultimate real estate. He owned the whole everything. And then he divided the land up into duchies and gave it to viscounts to run certain things. And they had little swatches of land. But that little is relative in this situation. And I'm gonna show you how. Because when we're dealing with expansiveness, let's look in a modern context. Because a lot of people never thought on this level, because we just don't. We get impressed by a big old house on 100 acres of land, like, yo, they got, nah, that ain't nothing. Because look, people in New York can understand borough. You got boroughs and burghs, which is the same thing. One is just Scottish and one is English. They come from the Latin Burghs. These are Scottish terms. But they mean the same thing. What do they mean? It means a castle or fortified town. And I spoke earlier of the manorial system in the lords and serf days, fortified town. The castle was to be protected. It had the minarets and all that on top of it for a reason. The layout of the land was strategic, military. Just like the lands we live on now in America. You think about the freeway system, there's a lot to it. But these things right here let you know that your 100 acres of land ain't nothing. Because these boroughs, which are these burghs, they exist. And we live on these things. And it's not yours, even though you think you're an owner. If you're a regular citizen, if you're not a royal citizen, real, you don't own real estate. It's not yours. And so, if you look at this word burg, coming from, in Greek, Burghs, you can see I always mess this word up. The bourgeoisie got burg in it. People who own castles, they were considered a certain class of folk, rich-wise. And so, you're not one of those. And in the Middle Ages, these burghs were granted self-government. Like I said, little cities and towns would spring up around the main castles, the burghs, because trading would be done. But the castle and the land is who you own, and it would resemble a city. But really, that's just somebody's crib that you own. That's somebody's yard that you setting up on. But who could own these things? Members of Parliament were able to own burghs and boroughs. That's who owned these things, and you couldn't. And so, they were basically owning burghs. Allocated burghs, and it was basically the size of cities. And I give you an example, like Pittsburgh. Sorry, Steelers fans, you ain't do it this year. But I love Mike Tomlin. That's the man. He gonna do it at some point. But Pittsburgh, you got rich families live in Pittsburgh that own hundreds of acres of land, right? But they don't own the bird. That's William Pitt's family. That's whose bird that is. That's whose crib that is. That's whose land that is. That's Pittsburgh. We don't even think like that. We don't have a bird. Feel me? And so that's the real estate. That's their real estate. That's their real estate. You got the suffix ham, which means hemmed in. And this is 2 M's, it's Old English. Put an O-E. All you 40 drinkers back in the day know what O-E is. Hemmed in, I was one of them, I came from. But the land that was hemmed in was a ham. And then you have, back towards real estate. You got like Birmingham, if you know Birmingham, Alabama. You might live there, you might have a big old crib on a lot of land, but you don't own the ham. The Birmingham family owns the ham, which means like home, a homestead, or village, or farm. You know what I'm saying? Home, ham, you see the corruption of the words blended into each other. And so what this does is bring the concept of sovereignty to the forefront. The modern democracy, like we know in the feudal days who owns this, who was the sovereign. Sovereign connotes who has the power. And so like in Britain, the Queen of England still has all the power, which is why in the tabloids and stuff, she's still foregrounded and still relevant, because that's who the sovereign is. That's who has the power. And it's usually a monarch. In the democracy that we live in, the people supposedly own the power. But if you look at the oligarchical structure and the certain dictator type people who are in leadership, I'm not saying names, you see the power is not in the people. What gives you the understanding, it's tied to the word real estate. If it's royal estate, then if you own that and you're not royal, you're not sovereign. And especially the big telltale sign is we regular folks, we still pay property taxes. If you're paying property taxes, then how are you owning that land? You can think that you own that crib, but every time, you say keep it real, really, it looks so realistic, I didn't realize it. What we're doing is we further entrenching like the dominance of the royal, the royal power mode, and it claims the superiority over us. We substantiating that still. Just a thought. In reality, if you break it down, it just means the royal version of what is. It's not rooted in what God set up or anything like that. It's just a royal version, tied to land, tied to what we know is reality itself. But it's not truth. It's not truth. It's just not. It's the royal version, real. It's just a well-funded, well-researched version of what is, of how to do human. So, just to recap, royal estate is royal status. Royal status is royal estate. Royal status, y'all. What's your royal status? Are you royal? And if you paying property tax to somebody, then somebody hiring you controls that land. You don't have no royal status. You're a modern day serf, to be honest with you. So just to close, I'm gonna always strive to keep it 100, but I refuse to strive to keep it real any longer, because I know what that actually means. It's a word that means royal, and I'm instantiating the powers that be even more so as I put it in my language. The Oxford English Dictionary says that we use the word or some form of real 200 times out of 1,000,000 words. It's all up in our language power dynamic wise. So we keep that going. We keep that royal thing, and just lack of knowledge that we keep bigging them up. Yo, I'm gonna keep it real, son. Nah, you keeping it royal. I'm gonna keep it original. I'm gonna keep it God-like if I can. All right. So this is Garfield, Dr. Garfield Bright, signing off from Curiosity Collage. Welcome to episode number 4 next week, and make sure you tune in. One love. Mwah.